Now that we successfully connected our code to the SQL database, let's start working on the project. And for this, I'll remove this code in the app.js file because this was just some testing code, not the real code we'll use. Instead, I of course want to work on my models here. Let's stay on the product model. There we right now already have an export.class, which we can instantiate, and where we then, for example, have a save method to create a new product. Now, even though we're still fetching product from our file for now, we also have our static methods for fetching data. And there we fetch data from our files. Now, we can do that, but of course this is not really the setup I want to use. I will still work with static methods for fetching data, but I want to fetch data from the database and not from a file. To do that, in my product.js file in the models folder, I don't need fs and path because I'll not work with files and paths anymore. I don't need to construct that path here at the top. We can leave the card for now, but that functionality will be broken for the moment. I don't need my helper function here for getting products from a file because we'll not work with files anymore. I will still create a product like this, so I will leave that code as it is. However, I will delete my code for saving here. We'll overwrite this eventually. I will delete my code for deleting, for fetching, and for finding by ID. And I want to start with fetch all now. Here, I also don't want to work with callbacks anymore, but with promises. So I don't need that argument, the callback argument. I shouldn't need that in any of my functions here. So fetch all should now reach out to the database. And what do we need to do that? Well, we need to get access to the database. So let's import our pool object from the database.js file. So I'll create a new constant db and require database. Whoops, not database, but we'll go up one level into util and there, database.js without JS. So now we get access to the pool. And now in fetch all, we can execute a query. And now, which query do we need to execute here? Definitely feel free to pause the video and write it on your own if you already know it. Well, here we want to fetch all products, so it's the exact same query we ran before. Select everything. The star stands for everything. We could also select just the ID and title with this syntax, but I want to select everything, all fields, from products. Now, as a side note, you could write select and from in lowercase too, but I like to keep these keywords uppercase to indicate what is core SQL syntax and what are our dynamic values. So we select everything from products here. And now, as I said, this returns a promise. Now, we could add then and catch here, but actually, I'm interested in the returned value in the place where I'm calling fetch all. So I will simply return the entire promise that execute returns so that we can use it somewhere else. So now we can go to the place where we do call fetch all, and that is in the shop.js file in the controllers folder. There, for example, when we get the index page, we do call fetch all, but right now we still pass in a function that previously was the callback. Now we got no callback anymore, so let's take out that render code, we'll need that later, and remove that anonymous function. Instead, fetch all will now return a promise, so we can add then and catch. You don't have to add both, but you typically also want to have some error handling mechanism, though we'll learn about a better one in the future, so later in this course. So here I will again simply log my error and not do anything else with it. But in then, you remember we got this nested array. Now we can use some next-gen syntax with a feature called destructuring, where I can already pull out information of the value I'm receiving as an argument here in my argument list. So here's my anonymous function, which will be executed once we get data. And instead of using result or anything like that, which is a nested array, I can use the syntax here where I pull out my rows and my field data. You can name this however you want. And this will simply be the first element of the nested array, which would be our argument data. And that will be the second element. And now we can use these two variables which simply hold these two nested arrays. And therefore I can console log them, but I don't need to log them. I instead want to render my page inside of this anonymous function. So once we got that data, and rows should be my products, because my rows here are the entries in the products table, and therefore these should be my products. If we now save that, and we go back to our running application in the server on localhost 3000, we should indeed see the book here, and also have no errors on our console. Now we see that book because our data is retrieved from the database. And therefore, if we were to go to that database and we, for example, add an exclamation mark here in the title and then click apply, you always need to do that. Apply, close. If I reload my page here, it has no exclamation mark right now, but now it has. So this is really coming from the database. Now, here's your little mini task. Also make sure you're fetching data from the database when loading the products page, which right now is broken or not working, because there we still try to reach out to a file which will not work. Try to fix this on your own before we then also start inserting documents or elements into the database.